Donald Trump's free IVF plan would almost certainly not cover me. In college, my gay best friend and I joked that if we hadn't found love by 40, we'd have a baby with each other. 20 years later, I'm pulling the ripcord. From deciding on solo motherhood to choosing IVF, I'm Meredith, and this is the backup plan. I am a childless cat lady living in elitist Southern California. I work in the entertainment industry. I'm using my gay best friend's sperm. I'm a feminist who used genetic testing to make sure that my embryos were viable and have already discarded one of them because it wasn't. And the embryos that I don't use, I'm willing to donate to science. I'm pretty much a mega nightmare. But if that sounds like fun to you, hit subscribe below. This week, I'm going to talk about the free IVF plan that Donald Trump has promised if he is elected president. And if you haven't heard of this plan, let me just fill you in on it very quickly. At a campaign stop in Pottersville, Michigan, Trump said, "I'm announcing today in a major statement that under the Trump administration, your government will pay for, or your insurance company will be mandated to pay for, all costs associated with IVF treatment." Now, government paying and your insurance company being mandated to pay, those are very different things, but whatever. Okay, so let's just set the table here and I'll explain where I'm at. Clearly, I vote left. I found a lot of single mothers by choice are left-leaning, are more progressive because you kind of wouldn't be in this predicament or considering this if you weren't, right? I mean, if you're conservative and you're a single mother by choice, please let me know. I'm very interested to talk. I'm a registered Democrat. I always have been, and I'm very proud to vote in as many elections as I can. I have missed 2, and I feel terrible about it. It weighs on my conscience like every day, but I was sick, and one of them, I misplaced the date. I was in college, and it just right over my head. They were primaries, so it's still not good. I think it's important to vote in every election possible and to do your research. I help register voters, and I have shared the research that I've done with friends when it comes to voting on a lot of different, propositions and these kind of complicated judges races and stuff. I have been known to go and do my research on every single candidate and make a spreadsheet as to who I'm voting for and why, and share that spreadsheet with friends. So if you ever need help, I'm your girl. I was raised outside of the DC area, and American history is something I was just always really, really excited about. Probably started with the American Girl dolls. But beyond that, I read a lot of texts. We went to a lot of historical sites growing up. I did a lot of research. I was a big old nerd. And the American promise was just something that was instilled in me from a very young age. It's kind of been beaten out of me a little bit the older I've gotten, but I still think it's a great place to live and can be better with our help. So vote. Just because I am a Democrat does not mean I am always pleased with what the Democratic Party does. I think that they are not the most proactive party. I am thrilled to be voting for Kamala Harris, but I am also a little bit frustrated that we haven't been able to have a full election cycle with her. I hate that when you go to her website, her platforms aren't listed. It's just biographies of her and Tim Walz. And while their biographies are very interesting, and while I trust their values, I would still like to see a little bit more of a plan laid out for the American people. But like I said, I see where her values lie, and I see what she intends to do with this country, and I see what the other party intends to do, and it's obviously a no-brainer. I will say that I have a very deep-seated Hillary wound. That was a really difficult time, and seeing her lose, and then my dad being diagnosed with cancer, very shortly after that, it was a very difficult time in my life. So it's hard for me to get as excited about Kamala as I was about Hillary. Let's just look for a brighter 2025, shall we? So when Trump made this IVF declaration this week, I decided it was important for me to talk about it here because I am in the middle of IVF. My original intention for this episode was to go through the news and pull out all these expert quotes and opinions. I was going to present to you a melange of expert opinion, tearing apart why this declaration was ridiculous. But while opinion and facts are very interesting, I love facts. I realize that as somebody who is going through this currently, who is deep, deep in the middle of a full IVF journey, that my personal experience is probably much more worth sharing. There are lots of ways that you can go ahead and read what the actual news is on this, but how many people are willing to talk about what it's like going through IVF while this is in the news, who are willing to share how this is affecting them. Because I've researched the hell out of IVF and IUI and all these different assisted reproductive technologies, and as somebody who's using gay sperm, as somebody who is herself bisexual, I have a different perspective to share here. So I'm going to do that with you. But a couple of facts and figures before we get started, because I can't not share some of the things I've learned. Currently, fertility assistance is covered by insurance in 17 states. So IVF is handled on a state-by-state basis, much like Trump wants abortion to be handled. If he wants to do a mandate for IVF nationwide, why not a mandate for abortion nationwide? But whatever, I'm not going to get into that. God save Roe v. Wade. I'm going to include a link in the description that outlines what is offered in each state, because it's really, really fascinating. And I got to hand it out to my home state of Maryland for doing some really incredible coverage. What I really appreciated about reading their coverage was that they have different rules for married and unmarried couples. And it's not that it like unmarried couples or a single person is held back. It's just they have different standards for how they proceed with care. But it's like $100,000 lifetime allowance. What? Now, if you're watching this from outside of the United States, which I know many of you are, it's also complicated in a lot of places. I did some research on Europe because it's, similar to the US in a lot of ways, and was shocked to find out that as recently as 2021, 12 countries in Europe did not allow single women to use IVF. As of 2021, in 16 countries, single women aren't even allowed to use any kind of assisted insemination techniques. And again, as of 2021, there are 24 countries in Europe that will not allow female couples access to assisted reproductive technologies. In 2019, France drafted a law allowing single women and female couples to use IVF. Prior to that, it had been illegal. France! And it wasn't until 2020 that Norway allowed single women to use IVF. This is all very recent, guys. Sweden bans IVF for women after the age of 42, and it's 46 is the age in Denmark. But Denmark ends up being a haven for a lot of women seeking IVF because they'll let foreigners come in and do it there. Okay, time for thoughts and feelings. First and foremost, hearing Donald Trump say babies fucking creeps me out, guys. I posted about it on Instagram and I was like, he sounds like a troll under a bridge. I don't trust what he would do with a baby if he had one in his hands, simply by the way that he says the word baby.
Because we want more babies, to put it very nicely. We want more babies, more babies. Babies have a beautiful baby.
Hearing him speak with such flagrancy about IVF, I can tell by the way he talks about it that he doesn't know what it entails. IVF is not a single procedure, right? It's a lot of little tiny steps along the way. There's not a single woman that takes the same path as another lady, right? Like, it is extremely, extremely personal. So to have it tossed out there as some sort of like political football is difficult, especially when I'm in it. And I haven't even sorted out all the feelings that I'm having about it as I go through it. And it just ends up kind of like being confusing and hurtful. And I hate it. I hate it. So the thing that came up mostly for me as I heard this news was questions. A lot of questions. Because of the complexity of my own process, I'm kind of looking at it from a perspective of alternative couples and alternative lifestyles. And so my main question is, who's covered? Because I don't believe when he says all IVF is going to be covered, I cannot believe that would cover people like me, gay couples that are out there in the world. There's just no way. And it's obviously something that would have to get, congressional approval, and the way that the Congress is set up, there's no way that those people would let that happen. And even if it was like, okay, sure, gay couples can use it. My situation is Michael and I are a couple of friends, and he's gay, I'm bi. Y'all good with that? I had difficulty finding company that would freeze Michael's sperm for my purposes. There's FDA clearances and stuff that have to happen when you're using known donor sperm. And I ended up signing away some of those protections because the FDA requires you to have a quarantine period because we don't trust homos in their sex life, I guess. Editor Meredith popping in to say that the FDA quarantine is a suggestion, not a requirement, although I believe some states require it. So I just want to be clear about that. And I signed that away because I know Michael and we've talked about it and he's been tested and everything's good and clear and it's fine. But the verbiage that came along with this FDA clearance was really dehumanizing and upsetting. And so luckily Kindbody helped us through all of that. And I don't think I'd be as far along as I am right now if not for Kindbody, even though I'm like behind on my own schedule. Like I want to be a mom already, and I feel like I've been doing this for a really long time. I do know that I've gotten where I've gotten because Kindbody has assisted us in that process. So then IVF sometimes is not used as a means of infertility treatment, but as a means of family planning. I've read articles about couples, especially in the Silicon Valley area, that are utilizing their insurance company's fertility treatment packages to freeze their eggs, freeze their sperm, freeze embryos to use at a more advantageous time for them when they are better along financially, in their careers, what have you. And then they also use the PGTA testing to make sure everything is copacetic and to also choose the sex of their children. So if you're using IVF for those purposes, which gives you peace of mind, or is selfish, however you want to look at it, is that covered? Or would it just be the basics, right? Would egg freezing be covered for women at a younger age? Would sperm freezing be covered for men? Or is it just IVF for infertile couples? And as I said before, IVF is not just one thing. I went into this a little bit naive thinking, okay, you cross off step 1, and you cross off step 2, and then you're at step 3, and by step 4 you have a baby. But it doesn't work like that. Some women have to undergo a lot of different trials and tribulations, you know? I ended up going through 2 egg retrievals myself, and I think that the medication, the second go around, gave us better results. So how many rounds would it cover? Of which procedures? And speaking of that PGA testing I was talking about, would that be covered? Would genetic screenings be covered beforehand? Because Michael and I found out that we weren't carriers of those same genetic mutations. Thankfully, it was very helpful to hear. But say that that was covered. If the government is paying for it, do they then have the right to say, well, you guys carry the same gene that, you know, could put you at risk for having a child with Tay-Sachs, so we're not going to cover the rest of it? Or would they help you cover the genetic testing later to make sure that that baby didn't have Tay-Sachs? And then if that embryo did have Tay-Sachs, are you forced to carry it? Or are you forced to pay for storage on that embryo that you will not use because of embryonic personhood or whatever they want to call it, right? I wouldn't want to get an embryo transferred into me that I know isn't going to survive. And in fact, one of my embryos wasn't viable. If it was implanted in me, I would have miscarried it, which would have put me at risk, or it would have followed through and then not made it after birth. I didn't want to do that. So that embryo has gone off to little embryo heaven. But what would the government do if they were paying for all that, right? I like knowing that that discarded embryo was used for scientific research afterwards. I, of course, don't get the outcome, or they're not telling me what they're testing it for or how they're using it in medical research, but it gave me a sense of, hope and responsibility to the human race to know that my misfortune is somehow helping the development of humanity. When my dad got sick with cancer, he really wanted to go to a teaching hospital because he wanted to be a part of any kind of research that he could to help end the plight with which he was going through. And that really stuck with me. So when I had the option to just discard the embryos or whatever, I said, no, use it for science. And I can't imagine the Republican Party would be chill with that. And look, I don't bring all of this up because I don't want more coverage for IVF. I do want more coverage for IVF, but I just think that politicians who know nothing about it shouldn't talk about it until they've done research, until they know what it's like, until they've met with people who've gone through it, and they've talked to doctors about everything that it entails. I know Trump's not doing that. He's doing none of these things. I don't know. I can't imagine what it'd normal conversation with him is like. And look, I also don't have a perfect solution here. I'm not coming on camera to tell you, like, here's how I'd fix it, because I have no idea. I think about it a lot. And like I said, I read Marilyn's plan and I thought that was fantastic. I follow a really great couple online, Our Little Gay Life on Instagram, 2 bisexual ladies who got married last year, and they've been doing IVF and they've had some successful results. And the NHS covers IVF, but it's very specific how they cover it and who is eligible and whatnot. So that totally opened my eyes to the fact that, oh, governments could actually cover this. So I recommend checking out their journey because it taught me a lot. So what are your thoughts? I mean, comment below, and maybe in the comment section, we can come up with a perfect plan all together here on this little YouTube channel, because I can't do it alone. I am too busy planning for this month's frozen embryo transfer, which, let's do a quick little update on that. If you've been following along, you know that I have my 3 little embryos waiting for me, one of which is segmental mosaic, and coming up next week, I have a meeting with a geneticist, and I will find out just how usable or not she is. That is my 1 little lady embryo, and my 2 healthy embryos are boy embryos. The plan is to implant the healthiest one this month. I finally started my period. I feel like a normal person again. Thank God I was PMSing so hard. If you've been watching regularly, you also know that I've had a breast cancer scare lately. There's a release form that my breast surgeon has to sign off on in order for Kindbody to do the IVF procedure. Breast surgeon doesn't want to sign the form. She says the hospital won't let her. Kindbody is insisting upon it. I've gotten my doctors at Kindbody to agree to let me see my OBGYN or my GP and have them sign off on it. Even though I have all these test results and like miles and miles of texts saying I'm fine, that there was no cancer at all, I'm A-okay, but somebody has to sign off on something. So the day after Labor Day, I am going to be driving all over town, first of all, for that initial cycle appointment at Kindbody. Secondly, to see if my GP or OBGYN will take me in and give me a last-minute physical. Listen, if anybody can get it done, it's me. So that's tomorrow, and hopefully I'm injecting myself with medication next week. Anyway, thanks for listening, guys. Please be sure to like and subscribe. Let me know your thoughts on all this below. I know that was a lot, and some people are like, oh, I don't like to get political. I love getting political, so enjoy. It's going to keep happening. And have a great week. Wish me luck. Follow along on Instagram, and talk to you later.
The Backup Plan is created, produced, and hosted by me, Meredith Kate. Julian Hagens is my co-producer. You can find us on social media at Backup Plan Pod. The best place to get updates is to sign up for our newsletter at backupplanpod.com, where we also post all episodes, show notes, and transcripts. Thank you for listening.